this is Christina from GlobalGrind, and we're sitting here today with accomplished actor and best-selling author Hill Harper to discuss his book, Letters to an Incarcerated Brother.
Yes.
So, our audience, we know you from He Got Game and Covert Affairs and multiple other roles that we love you in, but how did you get into motivational writing?
Well, it started, I really thought that my first book, Letters to a Young Brother, was going to be my only book. I was doing a lot of speaking. I got invited because the fact of my educational background. I guess got invited by a lot of schools to come speak, at the schools, and I would do that, and a lot of young brothers would come up to me after the talks and ask me questions and ask to stay in touch. And this, my first book, Letters to a Young Brother, was kind of a response to that because I couldn't stay in touch with all of them. But I wanted to write this motivation book because it was clear that a lot of these young men didn't have role models in their life. They didn't have an individual that they could talk to on a regular basis. They could help them navigate that journey from young manhood to manhood. And so I wrote Letters to a Young Brother, and then wrote Letters to a Young Sister because a lot of young women were saying, well, where's our book? And so I wrote those two books, and out of those two books, really, this book was born.
Do you have a personal connection to incarceration? Anyone in your family, and were you able to kind of contribute and put that in the book?
Yeah, I've had family members who have been incarcerated, extended family, none of my close family. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you, my most prescient experience with incarceration came from my family, but not from family members. My father worked in a prison in Iowa. He worked with mental health of inmates. Mm-hmm. And my grandfather had a farm in Iowa. And there would be times when I'd come down, when I'm staying on the farm for breakfast, and there'd be some strange person sitting there. I didn't know who they were. And I'd say, who's this? And they said, well, they just got out of prison. They needed a way to get back on their feet. So we gave them some work here on the farm. So they're staying here for a little while till they can find a place to live. And so my family, my history, my family has been about service and been about, okay, you may have made some poor choices. You may have had some unfortunate circumstances, but just because you have a felony or you've been to prison doesn't make you a bad person necessarily. It doesn't mean it should follow you the rest of your life and stigmatize you. And so that's been my connection.
What can we do to help these young brothers?
Okay, it's a multi-pronged problem, so we have to have multiple solutions.
Right.
One thing that we have to do is provide incarcerated people information and let them know about resources that are already available to them, and that's what I have in the book. And one thing I'm asking people to do is gift the book. I have a website, www.incarceratedbrother.com, where you can go onto the website. It's really simple, easy to navigate. You can choose a prison in your state or choose an organization in your state that works with incarcerated people or formerly incarcerated, and you can gift them the book. Go to Amazon.com, BarnesandNobles.com, doesn't matter. Send the book to the warden at the prison. It'll end up in the prison library. Send the book to the organization. That way, it's not whether you have somebody in your life or not, or in your family, that you can give the book to. And hopefully you'll read the book yourself and start a bigger conversation about the top-down solutions. But at least immediately we can get information to the hands, because this book has a lot of tools and resources for people who are incarcerated to take advantage of.
So today, Don Lemon endorsed Stop and Frisk with a pretty interesting analogy.
Okay.
But I just want to get your take.
What did he say?
Would you rather be politically correct or safe and alive?
I like Don Lemon. I think he's a smart guy, but I don't think that's the right. You're not juxtaposing. I don't think that choice is not correct. In other words, it's not about you're either politically correct or safe and alive. Stop and frisk policy cuts against certain protections that we have in the Fourth Amendment.
Yeah.
That's the Constitution of the United States. And stop and frisk is interesting in that it's in many ways applied in such a biased way. It's racial profiling. And so what's interesting about it, I've always said this, that if you're going to have a policy such as stop and frisk, it needs to be applied to everybody equally.
Yeah.
So police should be in Wall Street stopping and frisking these Wall Street execs as they go to work.
What role can hip-hop play in changing these policies and supporting our young brothers and helping them once they get out of the system?
Lupe Fiasco, he talks about the idea of not allowing your history to affect your future. And I'll just read a little bit. He said, "Dear brother, everybody within 6 feet of me has been to prison, whether it is my assistant or my brother or my cousin who is just now getting sentenced for drug charges. So I have a fully formed relationship with the black incarcerated mind and the institutionalized mentality. There's no push to learn what the blank you are and why the blank you are doing what you're doing and how you can stop. But you can stop yourself from participating in it. That's also when society and community come into play, because if a brother comes home from prison and he has no place to sleep, that is a failure of the community, a failure of us." And that reminds me right there of a quote that I have in the book where Lemon Anderson said that the toughest part of getting out of prison was going home. You know, many of us from our communities, folks go away, we forget about them. They're not learning any new skills. They're being left behind in terms of technology, etc. They come back, they have a felony on the record, it's extremely difficult to get a job, and the community, as there's no support system within the community to catch them, they end up going right back. And so hip hop is such a cultural influencer that many of our young people and many of our older folks can learn from what artists say and talk about and infuse in the music. Now, we can talk about the glorification of drug paraphernalia and violence and weaponry within music, and we can see how that affects behavior or mentality. But I'm not into censorship or concerned with artists. I want artists to be able to express themselves the way they want. I think they have to be careful about who and why they're being promoted to come out with certain material by executives that may not look like them, that want to make money or proliferate a type of message that may not be that artistic or even what they're really about. But I'm more concerned about how they walk through the world and what they talk about when they're not making music, and letting people see that life. Because to be a successful long-term entertainer, you're not running around with weapons. You're not running around with drugs. You're not running around doing illegal activity. You may say you're doing it in your music, but you're actually not doing it, right? And that's what young people have to understand, that there's a difference between what's represented in the music and what's actually happening. Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Hill Harper, author of Letters to an Incarcerated Brother. Please, please, please gift this book out. If you know a young person, buy it, gift it to them, bring it to Thanksgiving dinner, talk about this issue of mass incarceration. You can also go to www.incarceratedbrother.com, that's incarceratedbrother.com, and find out how you can order the book and directly send it to prisons, to get into prison libraries and to get into organizations to work with the incarcerated, formerly incarcerated. I appreciate it so much. And you know what? You're watching GlobalGrind TV, the baddest TV in town.